Okay, hello, and welcome to the next in the Effective Writing Center series of workshops. I'm Dan Gallagher, Director of the Effective Writing Center. Today's workshop is titled There Are No Rules, The Audience Rules, Academic versus Business Writing, and is being presented by Kevin Folliard and Teresa Stevens. Kevin Folliard has been assisting UMUC students through the EWC since 2010. He has a bachelor's degree in English and creative writing from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. In addition, he pursues freelance copy editing and fiction writing. Teresa Stevens has been with the EWC for over 6 years. She has a BA in creative writing from Purdue and a law degree from Indiana University at Indianapolis. Among her other accomplishments, she is a multi-published author and has worked as both a literary agent and in acquisitions for a small fiction press. The Q&A app has been added to this Hangout. If you currently see the showcase view, you should be able to select Q&A instead, either at the top of your screen or in the menu on the left. Please feel free to type questions during the workshop, and we will allow time for responses throughout. This workshop will be archived for future viewing in the Effective Writing Center's Google Plus community. And now, to begin tonight's workshop, I will turn it over to Kevin Folliard.
Thanks, Dan. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the EWC's overview of business writing versus academic writing. In this presentation, Teresa and I are going to review some great tips for how to strengthen your business writing skills by reviewing helpful tips on what to do and what not to do when writing business documents for a business audience.
Teresa, can we get the screen share going?
Can you see it?
I see it now. Oh, well. We need to make it full size, though.
Let's see.
Slideshow. And then from the beginning.
There we go.
There we go.
Can you see it?
I still see the PowerPoint view, not the full screen view.
Let's try again.
Okay, I've got full screen on my computer. Can you see the first slide?
I do see the first slide, but it's the PowerPoint within PowerPoint.
Okay, let's see. I'm going to try that again. From the beginning?
Yep.
Do you have the full screen now?
No, I think, Teresa, if you could just stop presenting for a second and then try it again.
Okay, I see Kevin now.
Okay, so hit that screen share again. And your entire screen.
Do you see it?
Not yet.
Oh boy, this is crazy. Okay. I'm going to try to just start everything right on from the beginning.
Okay, so hit the screen share button. And then do your entire screen, not just the PowerPoint.
Do you have it?
And now start from the beginning.
Okay, it's showing full screen on my screen. Do you guys see it?
Nope, but let's just go ahead and we will view through this.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem. All right. Now, Teresa and I are going to review some great tips for how to strengthen your business writing skills by reviewing helpful tips on what to do and what not to do when writing business documents for a business audience. Before we get into our tips, let's take a moment to examine the differences between academic writing and business writing. Are we able to switch to the slide 2, Teresa?
You can't see it?
No, I had a feeling that might happen. We're still looking at the PowerPoint, just looking at slide. There we go. Now we're on slide 2 in the PowerPoint.
Okay.
Okay. Now, before we get into our tips, let's take a moment to examine the differences between academic writing and business writing. Academic writing is aimed at an academic audience, scholars, professors, and journals. When you write for scholarly purposes, you'll usually be composing research papers, persuasive arguments, proposals, findings, etc. Academic writing is almost always formal in tone. Business writing, on the other hand, is aimed at a business audience, employees and stakeholders. You will typically be writing reports, memos, letters, proposals, policies, and procedures, etc. Depending on the purpose and function of your document, the tone can vary. The good news is that there are many similarities between academic and business writing. Both types of writing are professional and informative by nature. However, there are also some key differences to keep in mind. In academic writing, you will typically have 5 to 10 sentences in your body paragraphs. You will have a consistently formal tone. You will want to always be very clear. And you are encouraged to use more words if you must, in order to keep ideas clear and easy to follow. In business writing, your body paragraphs can be very short. Sometimes you may have a reason for a less formal tone. You want to be concise, and you want to reduce the complexity of your ideas and information if you must. In all kinds of writing, your audience matters, but your audience is especially important in a business context. In academic writing, the audience is typically the same, a group of colleagues and your instructor who already have a sense of your topic and context for your writing. But in business writing, you may have multiple audiences. Sometimes that means you have to write one document to suit each audience, while other times you may need to write multiple documents. Sometimes you write one business document in order to propose writing another document. This makes business writing interesting and unique, as no two documents will ever be exactly the same. It also means that audience analysis, knowing and understanding your audience, is as important as any word you choose, so be thorough and consider your main objective. In a business context, your audience may be a supervisor, a colleague, a subordinate, an existing client, a potential client, a business partner, or a combination of those people. You may be writing a proposal, a report, an invitation, an internal memo, a transmittal memo, etc. The importance of understanding your audience and how to reach them cannot be overstated. Now, let's get into some tips for improving your business writing. Check out that stoplight in the left-hand corner of the slide. That means in this section, we're going to cover tips on what to stop doing in your business writing. These are habits to avoid, break, and eliminate when writing a business document for a business audience. First up, stop using jargon and slang. Jargon and slang are conversational words, phrases, and sayings that may not be universally understood within your organization or for your particular business audience. What may seem like a familiar shortcut can actually undermine your message and create confusion or misunderstandings. Jargon and slang find their way into business writing because they appear to be topic-specific, feel conversational, create a personal connection to the writing. But what they actually do is lead to misunderstanding or mixed definitions, cause confusion for a reader who is not familiar with the terms. Jargon and slang can be specific to culture, geography, personality, gender, etc. Leave them out. For some people in your audience, a seemingly familiar expression may be difficult or even impossible to interpret in writing, as there is no opportunity for interaction between the author and the reader. Sometimes in a conversation, we can get away with using jargon or slang, and if used in the right context, you might even build a stronger relationship. But in business writing, the chance of misunderstanding or confusion is not worth the risk. Here's a simple but practical example of why we should avoid the use of slang or jargon in business writing. Have you ever heard the phrase, "pour the sweetest cup"? I had never heard of it, at least not in a business context. The phrase was used in this sentence: in order to pour the sweetest cup, it is critical to understand the values and strategic goals of ABC Corp. This could be taken several ways. Most likely, though, it will cause the reader to stop and consider the wording of what the phrase means. But do you really want your reader to stop and wonder what the sweetest cup is? Or do you want them to ponder your actual proposal or business idea? Jargon and slang can cause confusion and misunderstandings that might simply slow your reader down. Do this too many times, and they lose interest in your writing. Notice how much more universally clear this idea can become without jargon or slang. In order to put together the best proposal for a business partnership, It is critical to understand the values and strategic goals of ABC Corp. Our next tip is to stop using contractions. A contraction is when we use apostrophes to combine and abbreviate two words, such as will not, into won't. Contractions are conversational, informal, and they're fine for correspondence such as email, blog posts, and social media. However, contractions are not good for emphasis, and they're not appropriate for formal business reports or proposals. We have to put the stop sign on contractions for one main reason. Formal business writing sounds and looks better without them. This is actually one area where academic and business writing share something in common. Contractions are a normal part of our spoken language, first-person narratives, and some other less formal language use. But for business writing, we want to avoid them because they're conversational. In business writing, you may or may not know who your audience is. You may have a relationship with the person you are writing to, but what if their supervisor is reading the document that you send along? Contractions also have an informal tone, and they lack emphasis. For example, we're going to complete the report by next Friday versus we are going to complete the report by next Friday. Hear the difference? Now, there are some exceptions to this general rule. Business correspondence such as email, blog posts, and social media may all be appropriate environments for contractions. Those writing forums are by nature less formal, but outside of those few exceptions, let's save the apostrophes for something else. Our last stop tip is to stop using hasty generalizations. A hasty generalization is a quick conclusion made about something that does not have enough evidence or support. Hasty generalizations are a dangerous shortcut that can undermine your business writing and quickly cause you to lose credibility with the reader. A hasty generalization, or logical fallacy, occurs when someone draws a conclusion based on minimal, unrelated, or otherwise unsupportive evidence or commentary. These broad, sweeping statements are quick and easy traps to fall into. The problem is they really do not tell the reader anything about the content that you're writing about, and in some cases they can even misinform the reader. For example, in the sentence on the slide, the writer has reached a hasty generalization. In the lunch line today, the first 3 children all chose chocolate chip cookies. Do not buy peanut butter cookies anymore. This sentence comes to a hasty generalization for the entire student body based on a very small sample size. The reader will naturally question why they should not order any more peanut butter cookies, because the school has many more students whose preferences have not been identified. In the second version of the sentence, there is concrete evidence to support the exact same conclusion. In the lunch line today, 97 out of 100 students chose chocolate chip cookies. Do not buy peanut butter cookies anymore. In the world of the business document, the consequences of hasty generalizations, sometimes referred to as logical fallacies, can significantly impact the message, especially when making recommendations or encouraging specific actions. Be clear and be specific and be accurate about the reasons behind those recommendations or directions. Now I'm going to hand things over to Teresa, who's going to tell us a little more about some cautionary strategies that can be helpful in business writing, provided that you use them for the right reasons and under the right circumstances.
Thank you, Kevin. In our next section, we will look at some yellow light cautions. With a yellow light on the traffic signal, we may proceed through an intersection with care. In a similar way, using care and good judgment can help us decide whether it's safe to proceed with these particular writing methods. Sometimes it will be safe, but many times it will be much safer to stop. An announcement or a headline is a bit of language inserted into a sentence that talks about the paper itself rather than talking about the topic of the paper. This can seem confusing at first, so let's take a look at an example. The aim of the paper is to inform about cultural similarities and differences between coworkers from Japan and the United States. Notice in the example that the italicized words talk about the paper itself and deliver a headline about what will follow in the rest of the paper. If we remove those italicized words, we are left with cultural similarities and differences between coworkers from Japan and the United States. That's the topic of the sentence. So next we ask, what about this topic? Why is it important? What about cultural similarities and differences between coworkers from Japan and the United States? The answer to this question will lead to a better sentence. Cultural similarities and differences between coworkers from Japan and the United States create opportunities for growth in the workplace. It's important to note that this changes the subject and verb in this sentence. Many of our recommendations for both academic and business writing are designed to create a stronger subject-verb pair. This pair is the foundation for a good, clear, concise sentence. Here, in the first version, the subject was aim and the verb was is. The aim of this paper is. These words don't carry any specific meaning related to the topic of the sentence, which, as we know, is cultural similarities and differences. In the revised version, those cultural similarities and differences are now the subject of the sentence, and the verb is create. This stronger subject-verb pair delivers more information about the concept of the paper itself. As with all of our yellow light cautions, there are exceptions to this general rule. First, in an introductory roadmap, transitions are helpful. We use words like first, second, and third to tell the reader how the paper is going to be laid out through the body. These transitions are announcements because they do inform the reader the order in which the ideas will appear, but they're also short enough to avoid disruption and distraction. Second, announcements are more accepted when wordiness or a chatty tone are allowed. The more casual the writing environment, the more acceptable announcement language becomes. Third, announcements are tolerated in abstracts. However, they're not preferred, so in most cases it will still be safer to avoid announcements in an abstract. Fourth, some professors don't mind announcement language. Is yours one of them? You can find out, and that way you'll know for sure. Just ask. Finally, in science writing, including medical research, there is more tolerance of announcement language, particularly when shifting between concepts within the paper. In formal writing, the general preference is to avoid personal and directive pronouns. Personal or first-person pronouns are I, me, my, mine, we, us, our, and ours, and they appear in phrases like I believe, I think, we must, and similar. Usually these words can be very easily removed with no further changes needed. So this, I conclude that American and Japanese workers have much to learn from each other, becomes this, American and Japanese workers have much to learn from each other. It's a simple solution. Another trick is simply to replace possessive pronouns with articles. So for example, my conclusion becomes the conclusion. We also avoid directive or second person pronouns such as you, your, and yours. These appear in phrases like you should, if you, then you, and usually these sentences are going to need more revision than a simple trimming or word switch and will need to be handled on a case-by-case basis. The reason that the tone in these pronouns can be tricky is that it can almost take like a scolding note or a directive note. In both academic and business writing, there are exceptions to this general pronoun rule. Narrative writing is sometimes required. Then personal pronouns are useful and expected. In both academic and business writing, a casual tone allows for more flexibility with pronouns. So if you're writing a forum post, an email, or delivering a colloquial presentation such as this one, it's a little bit safer to use them. In business writing, when we recap interactions between stakeholders, use the expected pronouns. When we last met, you asked me to. This will help you avoid confusion and remain concise. Also in business writing, recommendations and evaluations sometimes work better with these pronouns. Use your best judgment. Another area for caution is with rhetorical questions, which are questions posed directly to the reader. For example, have you ever wondered, or what if? Rhetorical questions shift authority from you, the author, to the reader. Author equals authority. By asking the reader to supply information, even in the form of an opinion, you're granting them authority over your topic. Rephrase the question and keep the authority where it belongs, with you, the author. There are some exceptions when you do need to use rhetorical questions. For example, in a direct quote of a question from a source must still be phrased as a question. Here is our example. Do you know what happens to lads who ask too many questions? That's from a Terry Pratchett novel, and if you notice, the question mark is inside the quotation marks. Also, Socratic reasoning is a form of logical argument built around the Q&A format, but it's rarely used. We encounter it sometimes in legal studies or in philosophy courses. Outside of those domains, it's rarely used. And some professors instruct students to use specific questions as subheadings or as topic sentences. And in all things, if the professor tells you to do something, do it. Our next caution is passive voice. Passive voice is a little bit tricky to understand, so let's just take a moment to define what it is. In passive voice, the subject does not perform the action of the verb. So in our example sentence, the mail truck was barked at by the dog. What is the action? Barked. What's the subject of the sentence? Mail truck. Does the mail truck bark? No, the mail truck doesn't bark, so this is passive voice. Who actually does the barking? The dog. If we rearrange the parts, we get the dog barked at the mail truck. Now it's an active voice, and it's both clearer and more concise. There are exceptions to the passive voice rule. Sometimes the verb's action is performed by an unknown actor. During the riot, the victim was shot in the leg. In that example, because the confusion of the riot makes the actor unclear, the passive voice is appropriate. Defense attorneys use this tactic in court quite a lot. Sometimes we wish to obscure the identity of the actor. The classic example is mistakes were made. Who made them? I don't know. This is an attempt to conceal the identity of the actor as a way of shifting blame. Politicians use this tactic quite a lot. Sometimes in the context of business procedures and protocols, the actor is unimportant. Misuse of corporate funds should be avoided. In that example, it doesn't matter who should avoid this because everyone should avoid it. Passive voice diffuses the action across all possible actors. Finally, sometimes in scientific writing, passive voice is tolerated. I would argue that it's still not the best practice for all the reasons we've discussed, but it is tolerated. Use your best judgment. Sometimes passive voice is necessary. This concludes our discussion of the yellow light warnings, where a writing technique is sometimes acceptable but often unacceptable. Green lights mean it's safe to go. In this section, we're going to help you know how to proceed when you see a certain type of sentence pattern. Even though we've just told you to avoid jargon, we're going to be using some technical grammar words in this section. But when I use these terms, I'm going to try to give you a practical way to understand the example that doesn't depend on those terms. So our first green light, sometimes we see this pattern, a pronoun plus a linking verb plus a relative pronoun. In this example, the pronoun and linking verb are there are. There are some employees who have greater cultural awareness from the beginning. The relative pronoun might be who, whom, which, or that, and the pronoun plus linking verb can be things like there are, there is, it was. What do you do when you see this pattern? Cut those words. Some employees have greater cultural awareness from the beginning. All we've done in that sentence is take out there are and who, and we're left with a much stronger sentence. Notice in the first version, the subject noun and its verb are there are. These are low meaning words. They don't deliver much specific information about any concept at all. In the revised version, the subject noun and its verb are some employees have. These words have more specific meaning, and that makes it a stronger sentence. Sometimes we see words in between the subject and its verb. For example, real wages after the adjustment for inflation have decreased while corporate profits have grown. This is a fairly easy editing check. Identify the subject noun. In this sentence, it's wages. And then identify the verb. In this sentence, it's have decreased. Are there phrases or clauses that separate these two key parts of the sentence? If so, move those words. In most cases, the best fix will be to move those words to the start of the sentence. For example, after the adjustment for inflation, real wages have decreased while corporate profits have grown. Now the subject and verb are right next to each other where they form a more stable foundation for the sentence. You might have noticed that the two editing fixes we've green-lighted so far, the focus is on strengthening the subject noun and its verb. Sometimes it might be hard to identify the subject noun and its verb. For example, by paying too much attention to polls can make a political leader unwilling to propose innovative policies. There are many things wrong with this sentence, and we could talk about the technical issues. But instead, let's just focus on the practical fix. First, you identify the main verb. In this sentence, it's probably can make. Then ask, is this the most important action in the sentence? Who or what is taking this action? Use the most important action and pair it with the person or thing performing that action. For example, by paying too much attention to polls, a political leader can become unwilling to propose innovative policies. Now the sentence defines who is taking the action, a political leader, and what that action is, becomes unwilling. Sometimes, instead of not being able to identify a clear subject noun and its verb, we will have too many of these pairs. The meter must be calibrated properly. It should be tested before each shift. Identify the noun-verb pairs. Here we have meter must be and it should be. So there's more than one pair. Are they joined with a semicolon or conjunction? Conjunctions are and, or, but, nor, so, for, and yet. We don't see any of those here, so we know that we have to break up these pairs or add a conjunction. If we break up the pairs, it reads, the meter must be calibrated properly, period. It should be tested before each shift. Or we can add a conjunction. The meter must be calibrated properly and it should be tested before each shift. Keep in mind that for business writing, because the preference is to be concise, breaking up the pairs is probably going to be the better option. In academic writing, where we're trying to supply as much information as possible, adding a conjunction can add more information to the sentence by signaling the relationship between the pairs. You also have an option to add a semicolon between the pairs. However, many writers struggle to use semicolons correctly. They're probably the most easily mistaken type of punctuation. So if you aren't certain about semicolon rules, the safest option is just to avoid them and choose a different fix. Now we're going to look at a clarity fix that doesn't depend on nouns and verbs. Sometimes we see negatives in combination, such as less attention is paid to commercials that lack human interest stories than to other kinds of commercials. Look for words that are negative, such as no, not, and never, but be aware that words of reduction or absence, such as lack, and words of comparison that focus on the smaller portion, such as less or fewer, read as negatives. To fix this, make it positive. People pay more attention to commercials with human interest stories than to other kinds of commercials. Now there's a single comparative term, more, and no negatives in combination. As a bonus, the sentence is in the active voice now instead of in the passive voice. Finally, we'll look at what happens when our verbs try to act like nouns. In this sentence structure, we see a word ending with tion paired with a prepositional phrase and a verb. The implementation of the procedures can be accomplished. That tion word is called a nominalization. It's not important that you know the name of this word form, just that you know how to spot it and fix it. This word form is usually a sign of wordiness or jargon. In most cases, the tion word will work better as the main verb in the sentence. Implementation becomes implemented, and we use the noun from the prepositional phrase as the new main subject noun. The procedures can be implemented. This type of sentence structure is very common in social sciences, law, and business writing, so if you're doing those kinds of documents, be alert for the tion. We hope that we've given you some tools to help you understand the differences between business and academic writing, and that you will now have some good tools to help you write your documents. No matter what you are writing, there are 3 things you can do to increase your success. Know your audience, know your project, and know your dress code. We have a saying around the Effective Writing Center: you don't wear sweatpants to the prom. Different writing styles and rules are really just a dress code for your documents. Sweatpants are great in the right context, but so are tuxedos and ball gowns. Know the audience, know the project, and know the dress code. Do we have any questions?
We do not have any questions at this time, so I will thank you, Teresa, thank you, Kevin, and for anyone viewing this video, if you do have further questions, please feel free to post them directly below the video in our Google Plus community, and we will get back to you as quickly as possible. Thank you for your time, and everybody have a great night.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye.